Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I've always been skeptical about staying in someone else's home. Something about sleeping in a stranger's space, among their furniture, their quirks, and their history, always felt odd to me. But I needed a break, and the Airbnb listing looked perfect. A quaint, little cottage on the outskirts of a sleepy town, with picturesque views and more five-star reviews than I could count. Everyone raved about how cozy it was, how peaceful. I told myself I was overthinking and booked it. The first night was as peaceful as the reviews promised. The drive had been long, and I was bone tired by the time I got there. The house was just as charming as the photos. White shutters, a stone chimney, and ivy creeping up the walls. Inside, it smelled faintly of lavender and wood polish. The kind of place that feels like a warm hug. I made tea, settled on the couch with a book, and felt my nerves begin to unwind. When I crawled into bed later, the soft mattress and heavy quilt practically swallowed me whole. It must have been around 3 a.m. when I woke up. At first, I wasn't sure why. The room was dark, save for the sliver of moonlight spilling through the curtains. Then I heard it, a soft thump coming from the living room. I held my breath and strained to listen. Another thump. It sounded deliberate, like something heavy being shifted. My stomach tightened. Probably just the house settling, I whispered to myself. Old houses creak after all, but there was something about the rhythm of the sound that didn't sit right. Still, I forced myself to roll over and eventually drifted back to sleep. The next morning, I chalked it up to paranoia. I laughed at myself while I made coffee, shaking my head at how easily spooked I'd been. By midday, I convinced myself the noise was nothing more than my imagination running wild. But the second night was different. I was already on edge when I went to bed. I'd double-checked the locks on the doors and windows and left the hallway light on, something I never do. Sleep came fitfully, shallow and restless, until a sound snapped me awake. It wasn't a thump this time. It was footsteps, soft, deliberate steps outside my bedroom door. I shot upright, my heart hammering against my ribs. The sound was unmistakable, light but purposeful, like someone pacing. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight. My voice trembled as I called out, "Hello? Is someone there?" The footsteps stopped. For a moment, the silence was deafening. I sat frozen, gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles ached. Finally, I worked up the nerve to tiptoe to the door. My hand shook as I turned the knob and yanked it open. The hallway was empty, but there was something else. The faint scent of cigar smoke hung in the air, thick and acrid. I didn't smoke, and there was no one else around. It was impossible. I barely slept the rest of the night. The third night, I didn't even try. I stayed up, perched on the edge of the bed with my phone clutched in my hand. My nerves were raw, and every creak of the house made me jump. At 2 a.m. sharp, the doorknob began to rattle. It started slow, like someone testing it, and then grew violent, as if whoever or whatever was on the other side was desperate to get in. I scrambled backward, my breath coming in shallow gasps. "Who's there?" I shouted, but my voice cracked, betraying the terror I felt. The rattling stopped, but the silence was worse. I sat there, paralyzed, until the first rays of dawn filtered through the window. That was it. I couldn't stay another minute in that house. I threw my belongings into my bag, not even bothering to fold anything, and bolted for the car. Later, I learned the truth. The cottage had once belonged to an older man, a recluse who rarely left and was known for his love of cigars. He'd passed away in that very bedroom years ago. The locals whispered that he'd died angry, clutching a lifetime of regrets. They said his spirit never left, still pacing those halls, still rattling that damn door. I don't know if I believe in ghosts, but I'll tell you this. I'll never stay in an Airbnb again. Story 2. I was in the middle of a business trip, and after a long day of meetings and endless emails, I was looking forward to some peace and quiet. So when I stumbled across a charming Airbnb listing, I jumped on it. The apartment was located in a quiet, slightly older building in the heart of the city. Exactly what I needed for a few days of solitude. Modern, clean, and conveniently close to everything. It seemed perfect. The host, a woman named Diana, was friendly, if not a bit too eager to make sure I was settled in. She mentioned something about a locked basement for storage, but that didn't strike me as unusual. After all, lots of old buildings have basements, right? The first night went by without a hitch. I got some takeout, watched a little TV, and fell asleep. The apartment was quiet, peaceful, the kind of silence you'd expect in a place that wasn't meant to be lived in full time. But then the second night, things started to change. I had just finished a long day when I settled onto the couch with a book. The city outside seemed distant, muffled by the thick windows. That's when I heard it, a faint noise from below. It was almost like whispering. I wasn't sure what it was at first, so I ignored it, thinking maybe it was the neighbors. The building creaked and groaned like old houses do. But by the third night, the whispers had changed. They were clearer now, closer, like someone was calling my name. Katie, Katie. I froze. My blood turned to ice in an instant. No one else was supposed to be here. I thought I had misheard. The walls were thin, and maybe it was just some sort of ambient noise from the city. But this felt different. It felt wrong. I convinced myself it was nothing, that I was just being paranoid. But as I lay there in the dark, I could feel my heartbeat pounding in my ears. There was again, faint but unmistakable, my name, Katie. The next morning, I called Diana. She picked up after the second ring, her voice all business, as if she hadn't just been sleeping on the other side of the building from me. I heard some weird sounds last night, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. It was like whispers or someone calling my name. Could it be coming from the basement? There was a long pause, just enough time for a chill to crawl up my spine. Then, in a calm, almost too calm voice, Diana replied, "The basement is locked, Katie. It's storage. No one else has access to it. You're just imagining things. The house is old. It makes noises." Her words didn't comfort me. They only made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Something didn't feel right, but I didn't want to be rude. I thanked her and hung up. That night, as I lay in bed, the air in the room felt thick, pressing down on me, suffocating me. It was late, the city lights casting strange shadows through the window. I was trying to force myself to sleep when I heard it again. The creak of a door, far below. It was soft but deliberate. And then those whispers. But this time, they weren't whispers at all. They were guttural, deep, like someone struggling to speak. "Katie," they rasped. "Katie, come down." My breath caught in my throat. I wasn't imagining this. I knew it. I couldn't move. My limbs felt heavy, like they were weighed down by the thick, suffocating air in the room. I listened as the sounds grew louder. Footsteps. Slow, dragging footsteps that seemed to be coming closer, just beneath my bedroom floor. Panic swept over me. I locked the bedroom door and shoved a chair against the knob, trying to rationalize it, to tell myself it was nothing. But it wasn't nothing. My heart hammered against my rib cage, and every time I tried to breathe, I couldn't get enough air. I sat in the corner of the room, staring at the door, my mind racing. I couldn't leave. I couldn't stay. My thoughts were a tangled mess, but one thing was clear. I wasn't alone. The hours passed, but I couldn't sleep. The whispers had stopped, but the sense of something watching me, waiting, was unbearable. I kept my phone in my hand, ready to call someone, anyone, but I didn't. I couldn't. I was frozen, held in place by something I couldn't see. As dawn broke, I couldn't stay any longer. I needed to leave. I didn't care about the cost, the embarrassment of leaving a day early. I just needed to get out. The apartment felt wrong now. It wasn't a place to sleep, to rest, or to stay any longer. I hurriedly packed my bags, not bothering to fold anything neatly. All I could think about was getting out of there. As I passed the basement door on my way out, I froze. It was cracked open, just a sliver, enough to make my stomach twist. I stood there for a moment, staring at the gap. Something or someone was behind that door. The faintest trace of a muddy handprint smeared across the frame stopped me in my tracks. I don't know how long I stood there, but the feeling of dread was suffocating. Finally, I turned and fled, not even bothering to lock the door behind me. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I never contacted Diana again. And when I checked the Airbnb listing later that day, it was gone, marked as no longer available. No reviews, no pictures, just an empty page. I've stayed in countless places since that night, but I can never forget the basement door, or the whispers that still echo in my mind. Story 3. It was supposed to be the perfect getaway, a peaceful cabin tucked away in the woods. I had spent months working long hours in the city, drowning in the noise and stress. This was my chance to escape, to find silence, and to rest my weary mind. I booked the place on Airbnb, the listing boasting that it was secluded, offering uninterrupted tranquility and a chance to unwind in nature. The photos looked inviting, rustic, cozy, and surrounded by nothing but trees. When I arrived, Diane was already waiting outside to greet me. She was in her late 40s, maybe early 50s, with graying hair pulled into a tight bun and an unnerving, too perfect smile. Her presence immediately felt odd, like she was watching me, sizing me up, but I dismissed the feeling. She was just a host, right? A part of the deal, I told myself. "Welcome. I hope you find everything to your liking," she said, her voice sweet but far too eager. She handed me the key and showed me inside. The cabin was just as described, small, charming, with rough-hewn wood and large windows that framed the dark woods outside. But there was something in the air, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. The walls felt too close, as if they were quietly pressing in on me. I made a note to ignore it. After all, I'd paid good money for this experience, and I wasn't about to let a strange feeling ruin it. Diane left shortly after, but her lingering smile remained in my mind long after she had gone. That night, I lay in bed, the sound of wind rustling through the trees outside the only noise in the cabin. It was strange, peaceful, yet somehow oppressive. As I started to drift off to sleep, I heard it, a soft, almost musical laugh coming from the woods. I sat up in bed, listening carefully. It wasn't a loud laugh, but distinct enough that I could make out the cadence, like someone was enjoying a private joke. It wasn't the kind of laugh that made you smile. No, this one sent a chill straight down my spine. I couldn't quite place it, but it almost sounded like Diane's voice. The same pitch, the same strange undertone. I told myself it was nothing, just the wind or an animal. Maybe even the trees groaning under the weight of their branches. I closed my eyes, trying to dismiss the thought, but sleep eluded me. The next morning, I tried to shake off the unease and decided to go for a walk. It was crisp and quiet outside, the perfect kind of morning to clear my head. But as I returned to the cabin, there was Diane, standing at the door, as if she had been waiting for me. She smiled that same smile, the one that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I thought I'd bring you something," she said, her voice almost too bright. She held out a plate with a dozen homemade cookies. They smelled good, sweet, and buttery, but something about the whole scene felt off. Why was she here? Why did she feel the need to check in on me so soon? "Just checking in," she said again, her eyes never leaving mine. Her smile was still too wide, her gaze unnervingly fixed. I didn't know how to respond. My instincts told me to say something, but I couldn't quite put it into words. Instead, I took the plate and thanked her, trying my best to mask the discomfort I felt. That night, as I lay in bed, a deep sense of dread settled over me. It wasn't like before. This time, there was a weight to it, a heaviness that hung in the air, thick and suffocating. I tried to distract myself by reading, but my mind kept wandering. At some point, I heard it, the faintest sound like footsteps above me. My breath caught in my throat. Above me? I hadn't even noticed an upstairs. Was there an attic in this cabin? I had only rented it for a few days, so I didn't know every detail of the house, but there was no mention of an attic in the listing. I grabbed my phone and texted Diane, asking if there was anyone else staying in the cabin or if perhaps there had been any animals in the attic. My fingers shook as I typed, but I couldn't help myself. I needed answers, but there was no reply. Frustrated and a little frightened, I decided to investigate. I grabbed the flashlight from my bag and made my way to the stairs. The cabin creaked as I moved, the old wood groaning under my feet. The further I climbed, the more it felt like I was walking into a trap. The darkness above me felt heavy, as though the attic was pulling me in. When I reached the top, the sight that greeted me made my blood run cold. There, in the center of the attic, sat a single chair. It was positioned perfectly, as if someone had been sitting in it, waiting for me. The chair faced the window, but I didn't dare approach. The air was thick with an unsettling stillness, and I felt like I was being watched, even though I was alone. Before I could turn and flee, I felt a cold hand on my shoulder. I froze. The pressure was light at first, like a casual touch, but then it tightened. I spun around, heart racing, expecting to see Diane standing there, her smile still plastered on her face. But no one was there. The attic was empty. I ran downstairs, my heart thudding in my chest. I didn't know what I had just felt, but I couldn't deny it. Something was wrong with this place, and it wasn't just the atmosphere. It was her, Diane. I threw my things into my bag and didn't even bother to lock the door behind me. I just needed to get out. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still there, watching me from the shadows of the trees. A week later, I returned to check the reviews on the cabin. I was curious, and I should have been more cautious before booking it in the first place. One review stood out, buried at the bottom, buried under glowing remarks about the cabin's charm. It was written in simple words, but they made my skin crawl. Diane is always around, even when she says she isn't. I didn't need to read more. I knew exactly what it meant. I'd never go back.